Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome back for another virtual concert. I didn't decide what I was going to do until Friday, and it's simply because I couldn't remember the last time I did a concert of classic ragtime. And so I went back, and fortunately, all these concerts are archived on my YouTube channel, and it's been well over a year, maybe a year and a half, since I did an evening of classic ragtime. So here is this year's classic ragtime themed concert. Now, this music refers to Scott Joplin and his contemporaries specifically. The term was coined by music publisher John Stark, and it does not mean classical piano music. It means classic as in the best, and classic as in music that will stand the test of time, and it certainly has. Let's open with one of the early Scott Joplin rags from 1901. Here's the Easy Winners. There's the Easy Winners by Scott Joplin. And I love the early Joplin rags because they're a little bit more upbeat and just make you want to tap your feet. Scott Joplin was the undisputed king of ragtime in the early days. In fact, as far as I'm concerned, no one has surpassed his ability as a composer. They say he wasn't all that great of a piano player, but he certainly was the most gifted composer of the era. And another man who agreed with me was Joseph Lamb. Joe Lamb was a white man from Brooklyn who caught the ragtime bug at the turn of the century and happened to meet Scott Joplin himself when he was in John Stark's music publishing house in New York, and they became good friends. And Lamb was very much inspired by Joplin's music and attempted to write rags in the same style. And out of everybody, he was the most successful. And I think I'd like to play for you now. I think my two favorite Lamb rags, we'll just do them back to back, from 1915, one of the most gorgeous rags ever written. And I did get some requests for this. This is Ragtime Nightingale. And as I said, ragtime is not really classical music, but it shares many qualities with the great European classical masters' music. And you can hear that in this type of piece particularly well. Lamb quotes Chopin's Revolutionary Etude in the left hand, and also a little bit of Ethelbert Nevin's Nightingale Song, which it was a parlor piano piece of the turn of the century, and that's why it's called Ragtime Nightingale. Thank you very much. There's Ragtime Nightingale. I would say that my very favorite interpreter of the classic rags of Scott Joplin and Joseph Lamb was the late John Arpin, and I did get to know him. I worked with him about 3 times before he passed away. There was something very special about his touch on the piano, in my opinion, his feeling and expression for this music was exactly the way it was meant to be. It's hard to know, well over 100 and some years later, exactly what Scott Joplin would have wanted, but I think John Arpin gets pretty close. He doesn't play the music note for note the way it's written. He fills in a few octaves and harmonies in a few places, but otherwise, I think it's just right. A little bit of that is okay. I think in the early 1900s, sheet music was simplified for the people who were buying the music because otherwise it would be too difficult to play. And I think even Scott Joplin himself may have done that. He was trying to make a buck in those days. But the great classic rags need little filler. They don't need much added to them because they're so good in the first place. A great example would be this next piece, not by Joplin. I'm doing another Joe Lamb rag now from 1919, very late in the era. In fact, it was Lamb's last published rag during the original period. And it's called Bohemia Rag. But I do it like John Arpin played it, with a big marching band flourish at the ends. Here's Bohemia Rag. Thank you very much. Bohemia Rag. Hope you enjoyed that, folks. I see a comment here from Nick Taylor. He says, John Arpin was a master of many genres, including ragtime. I agree his style was superb and unmatched. Yeah, I completely agree. No matter what he played, it was just magnificent. Max Morath told me when he first met John Arpin at Club 76 in Toronto, Canada, that John was playing modern jazz, bebop, contemporary jazz styles. And I think he applied that to a lot of the standards of the American songbook that he played as well. And just made it amazing. But he's been gone, it's hard to believe, almost 20 years. It'll be 20 years next year. So I'm here to play for you. And if you enjoy this music, I do accept virtual tips for these concerts. All you have to do is send in a tip on PayPal or Venmo, and every little bit helps my career. There's both PayPal and Venmo information in the chat and the posting on all three websites. And so, I have a lot of listeners. Every little bit helps me make a career out of this music that's 125 years old. So I appreciate that very much. And send in your requests. Happy to play them tonight. I imagine I'll be able to get to a lot of them. At least Scott Joplin's music is still pretty well known, thanks to the movie The Sting and that song we're not going to talk about. I got a few requests ahead of time, as usual, which I write down here. I print them out on a piece of paper, and one of these came from my friend Dave Doberman, and he wants to hear, this is not really a classic rag, but an authentic rag that certainly fits in for tonight's concert. He wants to hear the very first published instrumental rag from the year 1897. And, this was written in imitation of the styles of black musicians in the Deep South, but it was written by a band leader from Chicago named W.H. Krell. This is the Mississippi Rag. Thank you very much. There's Mississippi Rag for Dave. Nick Taylor says, I just got home from a gig in Denver with Jim Calm and Molly Kaufman. Oh, how special. I sure would love to see Molly again. Jim, I don't know, I don't think. Robert Richardson says, piano sounds really good tonight. Well, it may be getting out of tune a little bit. The unisons sound good, but I think it's probably off pitch quite a bit. But we'll have to have Chris back up here to tune it sometime in the next month or so. Any requests? Don't be shy. Let me check Facebook real quick. I haven't looked at Facebook. Only got 20 people on here. Please share the Facebook stream. Hit the like button. The Facebook numbers have been down, so if you want to help me out, share the stream, please. Got a couple of listeners on Twitch, but just a few. YouTube is the thing these days, apparently. I did get requests to play a couple of rags by Tom Turpin, and he was a big influence on Scott Joplin, of course, and the creation of classic ragtime in St. Louis. Many people believe that American music started in New Orleans with jazz, but it really started in Missouri with ragtime. And so I'll play a couple by Tom Turpin for you. He was 6'8". He was the owner of the Rosebud Saloon in St. Louis, and they say he was so tall, he was just such a huge man, he had to put his piano up on bricks to play it. And 1900, he wrote this tune, which is based on a couple of popular banjo melodies of the 19th century. One is called The Darky's Dream, believe it or not. But he published this in 1900. It's kind of a short little rag, but I've always loved it. This is called A Ragtime Nightmare. Ragtime Nightmare. Thank you, folks. Well, you may see sitting here on the piano, I pulled out one of Turpin's rags, which I don't know if I've ever played this on a virtual concert yet. This is the only one I don't know by heart, so I had to get out the sheet music from 1904, I believe. Yeah, which believe it or not, was Tom Turpin's last published rag. Here's the original copy with the neat cover art, the Buffalo Rag. And this was recorded along with the St. Louis Rag by Wes Osman, one of the great turn-of-the-century banjo players on acoustic records of the period. And so I'm going to play for you now Tom Turpin's rarely heard but equally wonderful Buffalo Rag. Let me get out the sheet music here. Pulled out a lot of sheet music because I want to play for you some things that I haven't done 100 times. All right. The Buffalo Rag. very much, folks. Some of the early classic rags by Tom Turpin. Well, send some requests, folks. I don't see anything here. Oh, I do see some requests. Charleston Rag I can play. Rag in the Scales I can play. Ragtime Betty I don't know by heart. Okay, let's do this next. Dave Goodlaxon wants to hear one of the Charles Hunter rags. This is a good way to show you the difference between, say, the classic ragtime of the St. Louis writers and the Nashville ragtime of the turn of the century. So let me play one of the Hunter rags. I think, let's do Tickled to Death, because it's very different than a classic rag. This came out of Nashville in 1899, the same year as Maple Leaf Rag. And then I see some more I'll get to here in a minute. Don't worry. I can do some of those requests for sure. I'll get to as many as I can. But for now, an example of Nashville Ragtime, 1899, Tickled to Death. Thank you very much, everybody. Tickled to Death. Well, I do see a lot of requests here, but not a single one of them is for a classic rag. I do want to play some more of Scott Joplin's music for you, and let me do this one next, and maybe I'll play another request. Here from 1904. I think this is truly one of the more challenging Joplin rags, and I've been playing it more often lately, so I need to commit it to memory. We're almost there. This was written for the St. Louis World's Fair in 1904. And like I say, this is really quite challenging to play. I find it much more difficult to play than, say, Maple Leaf Rag. And it has very unusual key changes in it as well. It goes from the key of C to B flat and then E flat. Very unusual for a rag. And so here is Scott Joplin's The Cascades, named for the beautiful lighted waterfall at the St. Louis World's Fair. The Cascades. Thank you very much, folks. Can you hear how that is much more sophisticated musically than, say, Charles Hunter's rags? Big difference. All right. Let me get back to the requests. I'll try and do quite a few of them. I'm just reading the comments here, trying to find a request. I mean, there's quite a few here I can play. See a request from Daryl Woodruff for Hap Little Mose. Maybe I'll do that. I've got 2 requests for that, so that sounds like a plan. Okay, let's do it. Oh, thank you for the tip in the chat as well. You can tip directly in the chat on YouTube. This is not, again, a classic rag, but it's an authentic rag of the era that you might call a one-hit wonder, and it could have been written by one of the great ragtime writers, written by a man named Dugan, I think, Duggan or Dugan, and came out in 1903. It's just one of those rags that's so unique. It's wonderful. It makes you tap your feet. Got 2 requests for it, so here it is. It's called Hap Little Mose. I recorded this. I think I was the first person to ever record this on a CD. The album I did called Take Me to the Land of Jazz. It's a CD I did with Domingo Mancuello, but this is on there as a piano solo. Thank you very much, folks. There's Hap Little Mose, since I got 2 requests for it. You know, I don't know many of the rags that were written by women. I see a request for that, but I did do an entire concert called The Ragtime Women, and you can still go back and watch it on my YouTube channel. I was proud of that concert that night. Don't see anything new on Facebook either, so let's go with this request now. I see here from Carl Lundgren, a rag by James Scott, and we have to represent James Scott tonight as one of the 3 great classic ragtime writers: Joplin, Scott, and Lamb. The Bach, Beethoven, and Brahms of ragtime. And I did play this just recently in the Kansas City ragtime concert, but I need to do it again. I don't know that many rags by James Scott. So here from 1906. It's a very popular rag. In fact, they say, outside of Maple Leaf Rag, that this piece sold more copies for music publisher John Stark than anything else he ever printed. James Scott's Frog Legs Rag. Thank you very much, everybody. Oh, that's funny. Somebody posted a bunch of frogs in the chat. I don't know Great Crush Collision March by heart. Sorry about that. Since we just did a classic rag, let me play a Tin Pan Alley style rag for you now, just to break up the program a bit. And this one was written by, of all people, George M. Cohan, the great patriotic songwriter who was given a Congressional Gold Medal for his work as a songwriter, one of the only musicians in history to receive that honor. And I will definitely have to do some more of Cohan's music this summer, celebrating the 250th anniversary of the United States. And Cohan was one of the major figures of the ragtime era. And I got a request for this from my friend Lori up in Denver. So I want to play this for her. Since I just learned it, let's do it again. This is Popularity, the most popular rag by George M. Cohan. Popularity. Thank you very much, folks. Glad to get that request in for you. Gotta learn it, huh? What are we talking about? Must be the Great Crush Collision March. Well, I do love it, but when you have hundreds of listeners, you just can't learn it all. Nobody knows it all, but I've got lots of tunes that I can play for you, and I think I want to do a little bit slower one next. And so here's another classic rag, once again by the great Scott Joplin. They say he was a soft-spoken man from Texas, and really wasn't all that great of a piano player, but he had a brilliant mind for composing melodies. And one of Joplin's inspirations was a piano player from the bordellos of St. Louis named Louis Chavan. And he, unfortunately, like many of the piano players of the period, he died of syphilis in 1908. The year before he died, 1907, Scott Joplin met up with him and wrote down some of the melodies of one of his compositions, which is just gorgeous. This is really his only surviving rag. There are also two ragtime songs that he had published, but this is the only classic piano rag. The first two sections are written by Louis Chauvin, and Scott Joplin completed it and wrote the second two sections. This is Heliotrope Bouquet. If you've ever seen the sequel to The Sting, supposedly this is the theme song. I've never seen The Sting 2. I've never seen it. I have no idea if it's any good. But this is one of the melodies in that movie. And the second section, which is undoubtedly written by Chauvin, is very similar to the melody of one of Louis Armstrong's records, one of his jazz records of the 20s called the Heebie-Jeebies. And I don't know if it's just a coincidence. I don't think anybody knows for sure. But here's the beautiful Heliotrope Bouquet. Thank you so much. Heliotrope Bouquet. Yes, that is a gorgeous piece of music, isn't it, Kelly? Yeah, Dave agrees. Yes, very musical piece of music. Let me check all three websites for requests. Oh, Bob Milne has been listening over here on Facebook. Sorry, I didn't see that yet tonight. I need to play at least one more James Scott rag for you. And again, I think I did this fairly recently, but this is one of my favorites, which I've played for a number of years. It's very virtuosic and showy piece of music from 1919, the period during which jazz was taking over from ragtime. So James Scott wrote the New Era Rag. Here we go, New Era Rag. New Era Rag. Thank you, folks. Had to throw in a little bit more James Scott. Oh, okay, Judy. Banjo Judy says, never heard New Era Rag. Yeah, that's a great piece, isn't it? James Scott's music is very virtuosic. By the way, if you're enjoying the music and if you're a new listener, I do accept virtual tips for these concerts. All you have to do is send in a tip on PayPal or Venmo, just like we were in person at a gig, at a bar or a restaurant. And the virtual tips have really helped me with my career. And we're going on 6 years now. I've been doing these virtual concerts for over 6 years. It's hard to believe. And if you don't trust PayPal, there's a P.O. box on my website for checks as well. The information is in the chat and the posting on all three websites. It's much appreciated. It helps me out when I don't have enough gigs. And incidentally, there will not be a virtual concert next weekend. I will be going to only every other week for the summer season. I don't like to do it too much and kind of oversaturate the market. During the summer, I think every other week is best. And so the next virtual concert will be 2 weeks from tonight, which, let me check the exact date on that. I meant to look it up. 2 weeks from tonight would be May 31st. So that will be the next virtual concert. Be sure you write that down on your calendars, folks. Play a simple melody. Yeah, Ragtime Cowboy Joe. I could certainly do any of those. Dave says, I remember your very first concert. That's pretty special. Well, I'm doing mostly classic ragtime tonight, folks, but I did get a request. This one came on Facebook from Caroline Hancock. She wanted to hear what I would call a classic ragtime song, meaning a very popular ragtime era song with lyrics. That was one of the biggest hits of the era from 1899, and so I wrote this down. Might as well play it here just to change up the program. This is called Hello My Baby, written in 1899 by Joseph E. Howard and his wife Ida Emerson, two of the great vaudeville stars of the gay 90s. And everybody knows this tune now because of Michigan J. Frog. But anyhow, here's Hello My Baby, complete with the original verse to the tune. Hello, my baby. Thank you, folks. I see more frogs in the chat. That's really funny. Something must be, something's funny about frogs tonight. I don't know. I almost forgot I was going to play some player piano rolls for you. Let me take a little breather and do that. As I said, I don't know all that many rags by James Scott, so I pulled out a piano roll of one of them, and I don't think there's much point in showing you the label. You can't see it, but this is a piano roll of one of the ornithology rags, the ornithological rags. Is that a word? And the Ragtime Oriole by James Scott. But this is a Connorized piano roll, which probably came out around the time that the piece was written, at least in the 1910s. And this is an interesting roll. I believe Connorized was owned by QRS or bought by QRS at some point, but the Connorized label is the piano roll label for which Scott Joplin himself made hand-played piano rolls. And there are those that argue that they were really played by William Arlington. Yeah, that's the man's name. William Arlington. He is the pianist on this roll. And if you listen, it does sound a little bit like the Scott Joplin piano rolls. I'm not thoroughly convinced one way or the other. Personally, I'd say, well, why would they put out rolls with Joplin's name on them if he did not play them? Why would they should have just put Arlington's name on them. You can be the judge. Anyhow, at least we get to hear this beautiful piece. Here's Ragtime Oriole. The third section is almost exactly like the third section of Maple Leaf Rag. Ragtime Oriole. And I have yet another player piano roll to play for you. This is it's not a recut, it's a newly created piano roll. But by that I mean it could be 50 years old. It was created during the Ragtime revival, probably in the 60s. I haven't yet mentioned Arthur Marshall, one of Joplin's many piano students that became very successful, one of the greatest classic ragtime writers. Well, this is a piece of music that was published years later during the Ragtime revival. It had never been printed during the original period, and it was published in the book They All Played Ragtime, the third edition, which came out in 1966. There's 4 editions of that book, and This is, again, Ragtime came from Missouri. This is appropriately entitled Missouri Romp by Arthur Marshall. Just an arranged piano roll, not hand-played, in other words, but created during the Ragtime revival on the Classics of Ragtime label. So here's a Marshall piece. Here's Missouri Romp. Missouri Romp. All right, let me rewind the roll here. Good fun. Well, since we just heard Arthur Marshall, let me play one of the Marshall rags, which I know by heart. Been playing this for a number of years, and this was dedicated to his mentor, Scott Joplin, 1907, I believe, and published by the venerable John Stark. Here is Ham and. No eggs, it's just ham and. It's supposed to be like a diner order. Hammond. Thank you very much, folks. Boy, that's a stompy one. The great classic ragtime is not classical music, although it does share a lot of qualities with classical music. It's the first truly original American form. It is the first great American classical music. It's the first American folk music. It's the first American pop music all rolled into one. That's what makes it so great. There were, of course, ancestors of this music, such as the minstrel music of Stephen Foster and the classical piano works of like Louis Moreau Gottschalk. But at that point in the 19th century, the music itself did not have distinctly American qualities. It didn't have that offbeat, syncopated rhythm that makes ragtime unique. Got a request prior to tonight's concert for a Joplin rag that I have not played in a long time. In fact, I don't think I've ever done it on a virtual concert. I played through it a couple of times as a teenager, and so this is the first time I have played it since. And this is from later in Scott Joplin's life. I like to say that the early Joplin rags are very happy, a little bit more like the Tin Pan Alley rags, not quite. They're very folksy. Later on, Joplin's music became a little more moody. It became harmonically even more sophisticated. This one came out in 1909 after Scott Joplin had moved to New York. And this has wonderful cover art. Here's my original copy. And this is not published by John Stark. It was published by a Seminary Music Company in New York City. So here's the Wall Street rag. I'm entering a request here by playing this. Give it my best shot. It's a very unique piece of music by Joplin. Hopefully you can see the cover there. My copy's in pretty nice condition. But I'm not going to use the original copy. It's too valuable. Let me pull this out. Here we go. This is the only piece Joplin wrote that is, I think classical musicians might call it programmatic music. It could be, because, like a typical rag, there's 4 sections to the music. And for each section, Joplin has written a description of the music. Very slow march time. This is one of those rags that begs to be played a little bit slower. In general, ragtime was dance music, but this one, I think, just begs for a little slower treatment. The A section is Panic in Wall Street, Brokers Feeling Melancholy. The B section is Good Times Coming. C section, Good Times Have Come. And the final section, the D section, Listening to the strains of genuine Negro ragtime, Brokers Forget Their Cares. Wall Street Rag. Thank you very much, everybody. It was fun to play that because I haven't played it in about 20 years. Yeah, I never have played all of the Scott Joplin rags. I've never even sight read all of them. They're wonderful, but hey, at least that saves me some new ones to play for you. Let's see. Any other requests? Send in some requests. I've got time for one or two more, certainly for this evening's concert. Happy to do them. Let me go ahead and check the chat here on all the different websites one more time for tonight. I think I have to refresh the Facebook stream to see the chat. Yeah. Bob Milne's still with us. Sure good to hear from you, Bob. Wish we lived closer to each other, I have to say. Good times coming. That's what I hope. Well, I see at least 2 requests for XL Rag. Gene Austin, boy, I always love him. Tell you what, I'll try and get to all of these. I think I've got time for about 3 tunes, so let me try and do them all for you. You know, Gene Austin did sing Melancholy Baby. I think it would be nice to play that, and here's my reasoning. Even during the ragtime era, they didn't just sit and play one piano rag after another. A ragtime pianist of that era would have played a waltz, a march, and maybe then a popular song, and then a rag by Scott Joplin, and then maybe messed around with an early blues. And so just for variety's sake, let's do Melancholy Baby. This request came from Rory. Yeah, Rory Vanucci here on YouTube. He wants to hear something by Gene Austin. Well, Gene Austin didn't write this. It came out of Denver, Colorado in 1911. But he had one of the biggest hits on the song in the 20s. So here's My Melancholy Baby, complete with the original verse to the tune. Melancholy Baby, just a quick version of it. All right, I see about 3 requests now for one of my, I would say, truly my favorite rags. And it's a very interesting rag because this came out of Sedalia, Missouri, where Scott Joplin lived, but it is not written by Joplin. Clearly, the composer, Lee Edgar Settle, was familiar with Joplin's work. The XL Rag was published in 1903. By then, Joplin had already written Maple Leaf Rag and The Entertainer. You can hear quotes of The Entertainer in this piece. That's a little bit of The Entertainer, and then I think in the B section is where you can really hear Maple Leaf Rag. Anyhow, let's do both the Missouri Waltz and XL Rag. The legend is that the same man wrote both of them, Lee Edgar Jelly Settle. If Bob Milne's still listening, this is another one I stole from Bob. I love his arrangement of this. Thank you so much. There's the Missouri Waltz and XL Rag in honor of Classic Ragtime Night. Authentic Missouri Ragtime. Well, I'm actually going to play one more piece for you tonight. And let me check all the streams here. I said I was done with that, but yeah, I'm glad Bob Milne is here on Facebook. I wanted to check. I'm glad you got to hear that, Bob. I'm going to play one more piece for you tonight, this time by Joseph Lamb. And this is an example of where classic ragtime went. In the 1920s, novelty piano came along, and Joe Lamb wrote a lot of very sophisticated novelty piano solos for the Mills Music Company. And I thought it would be kind of neat to show you this folio for those of you that have never seen it. It's called Ragtime Treasures. And this was published in about 1964, just after Joseph Lamb had died. And it features a whole bunch of his unpublished music. Some of them were written for Mills Music Company, some weren't, I'm sure, but they're really just like his classic rags of the early days, just really good. Alabama Rag, Arctic Sunset, Bird Brain Rag, Bluegrass Rag, Chimes of Dixie, Cottontail Rag is in here, Ragtime Bobolink. Those are some beautiful pieces. Now, the most interesting one to me is this piece, because it shows Lamb's gifts as a composer. He could write brilliant novelty piano solos too. So here's Hot Cinders. I'm going to close the concert with this tonight. It was probably written in the 20s, but I can't necessarily prove that. Just to show you where ragtime went in the 20s. Here's Hot Cinders by Joseph Lamb. Thank you very much, folks. A cute piece to end this evening's concert. Oh, Leander has joined us. That's nice to have you with us tonight. Unfortunately, I have just finished this evening's concert, but I hope you've enjoyed this tribute to the great classic ragtime writers, the great ragtime piano that is America's first truly original music, a cross between classical, folk, jazz, and everything else. That's why I love it so much, and I sure appreciate your virtual tips, helping me to make a living as a musician playing this kind of music when I don't think hardly anyone else my age is doing so. So thank you very much for your online support, and I will be back 2 weeks from tonight with yet another virtual concert on all 3 websites. So try and remember, Sunday night, May 31st. I will see you then, and good night for now, folks.